Good morning, Misfits. You are tuning in to another episode of the Misfit Podcast. We're still short a goon. Papa Sherb is at home pushing around play school cars, and
he posted a workout today, courtesy
oh, you
of
know
CrossFit.com.
he's itching. You know he's itching.
Yeah, some toes to bar dumbbell snatches, some weakness work for the big guy.
Yeah, little weakness work. Housekeeping, real quick. We're gonna be real quick with this. Brand spanking new Misfit affiliate programming, also known as Team Misfit, phase starts today. You can head to teammisfit.com and get signed up. We've got free samples there. You can get a 2-week free trial in the SugarWOD marketplace. And we shot an entire podcast about that phase and about coaching that phase and about how we think about affiliate programming, and kind of took a deep dive. So that it will just be, you scroll one down on wherever you get your podcasts, and there we are. And Misfit Summer Camp, June 23rd through the 25th. You can get signed up at misfit.camp, our most community-focused camp of the year. We put you into teams. We do some sort of team-building exercises, and while we still cover movement efficiency and do our lectures and do all of that, we get to be outside, and we show you how you can use community and training partners and all that to get better at the sport, better at coaching, all that good stuff. We'll wait on the special guests, but there will be some special guests. So misfit.camp, get signed up June 23rd through the 25th, Misfit HQ, Portland, Maine. Lovely, lovely time of year.
Great time of year to be up in Maine for sure, especially if you've never been.
True. Snack chat. Let's get to the real shit.
Yeah. Okay.
I came to a pretty big realization this weekend, and it's gonna take some unpacking. But
okay, is this
you
like
remember
Easter dinner weekend sort of deal, or just the weekend in general? Okay.
Literally just me cooking something and being like, all right,
got it.
I got my snack chat for the week. I don't know. It's been maybe a decade since you could go to a restaurant and put an egg on a burger, right? They just started showing up as like add-ons, and you throw it on there because that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I like that.
Now it's a $26 burger.
Yeah. I prefer a breakfast sandwich with a burger on it to a burger with an egg on it. I'm going to let that percolate for a second.
So you prefer a burger for breakfast? Is that what you said?
No.
What's the difference between a breakfast sandwich with a burger on it?
Think about constructing a breakfast sandwich different than you do when you're making a burger. And I think the ratio is a little fucked. So it's like, just because it's good doesn't mean there isn't a better alternative.
Sure.
So you're replacing what would be a sausage patty or bacon with the correct amount of beef to still have it be a breakfast sandwich.
Okay.
You throw like a single, smash burger type patty in there.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. What kind of
game changer?
What kind of bun are we? Are we talking about a normal bagel, or are we going?
That's where it gets murky. Hamburger bun. But hear me out.
It's a burger.
No, it's not. Hear me out. I can't eat the glutens, and that's what I had in my house. That's all I had.
You had a cheeseburger
that was my only
for breakfast.
Choice.
You had a cheeseburger with egg for breakfast.
But when I do a burger with egg, I would do 2 patties. I would do a single egg. I would probably do some sort of like aioli or something. Whereas with the breakfast sandwich, I stick with the double egg. I make sure that I'm melting the cheese to the bun or on top of the egg. I go like more hot sauce
so it's like
based.
a breakfast burger.
Yeah.
I think.
When we bring in just enough of that, like the crust that you get on a real good smash burger to a breakfast sandwich, but it's not a burger with eggs on it. It's a very different experience.
What's the size difference? Because I think that could be an important distinction. I suspect your breakfast sandwich
probably
is smaller than like I'm gonna have a burger with an egg for dinner.
If I was making a burger and I just decided I want an egg on it, I would do 2 patties on a burger and then add an egg. Okay. I think that ratio for me should be 2 eggs, 1 patty.
For breakfast, though.
Oh, yeah.
Not for, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to get too far into the weeds on that, but I think there's some
That's a breakfast sandwich with a burger patty.
Ambiguity here. Okay. Yeah.
There are.
Drew just needs a reason to have a cheeseburger for breakfast every day.
You're deciding to have a burger. You're going 2 patties. This may be a controversial opinion.
Yeah.
But I would rather have 2 separate burgers with a single patty than 1 burger and 2 patties.
How much meat? Like a quarter pound, third pound, like
So
If I'm doing a smash burger,
yep.
I'm doing a third of a pound.
Okay.
If I'm doing
That's
pretty
sizable enough.
When
I
I do
might
smash-
take the same amount of meat and make 2 just to double up on the crusty goodness, and I might be dealing with a gluten-free bun that's a square inch.
yeah, when I do smash burgers, I usually do like 2.5 to 3 ounces per patty, so I can smash it really thin.
Yep.
And then you end up having enough patties for 2. Well, I don't want it to be so like wide that it's like, I don't know. I like the size and the shape of that. And then I will do a couple burgers with 2 patties, and then a couple with 1. But I do
How
agree.
many cheeseburgers are you eating?
Yeah.
Good thing you're sitting in front of Bo Bandy right now. Jesus.
I mean, if it's a yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like two doubles and probably 2 singles sort of deal.
Wait,
but
4 buns?
yeah. Yeah, 4 buns.
Holy fuck.
Yeah.
I love that. Jesus.
I will
Snack Chat's popping off today.
like you pretty typical, pretty standard like a potato bun. Sometimes I'll do sesame seeds to mix it up a little bit, but the standard potato bun. I haven't Yeah, see, I do the traditional like put the burger or put the bun like TP style over the melting cheese, so it kind of steams and softens the bun. Yeah, well, that's the traditional way to do it. So I feel bad doing maybe the have thought about that.
One more time.
Ciabatta
2
roll.
double cheeseburgers and 2 single cheeseburgers.
Yeah, it's like whatever the meat, it's about a pound of meat, like because the packages of beef that I get are in a pound.
I'd be terrified to go to your house if you just by accident bought one of those big meat tubes from Walmart, and you're like, well, the package determines what my meal
is. That
is.
is 1 serving. Like this pound of meat is 1 single serving. That's like hungry boy evening. It's been a while since I've dropped a four burger with 1 pound of beef.
I hadn't had a cheese, like it was like 2 weekends ago that I made the first cheeseburger that I've had in God knows how long. And I was just at the grocery store and I was like, I need a fucking cheese. I need it. I need a cheeseburger. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Just get fired up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Take my shirt off and let my gut out.
But get the tank top, get the white.
I have to send out the warning. Our fan is so loud, and it's like 15 feet from the couch. Maya's watching TV, and I'm like, it's about to get weird in here. It's about to get real weird in here.
Oh yeah, well, I don't even have a overhead in my apartment. I just have a gigantic grease stain above on the roof, on the ceiling. Above
Hunter comes in and he's got grease across his forehead. It's like, what happens? When you cook burgers.
No. Yeah, I don't know if it's legal. It's a lot of grease, a lot of stickiness. Wow, that was pretty good. My snack chat's not nearly gonna surpass that, but my
Yeah, no, you just dominated snack chat with your 14 burger.
Okay, fair enough.
Jesus.
Watch this. Here's dessert, or actually breakfast or dessert. Now again, multi-purpose food item here. I recently acquired a Ninja blender, one of the 1100 watt boys, and holy fuck, that thing,
like a big boy.
Yeah, it's basically the same one that we have at the gym, like a slightly newer one, and it has the. Yes.
I also feel like there's a side conversation recently acquired. Did you like break into someone's house?
No, I just finally pulled the trigger.
You just bought it.
One of my friends like got me hooked on it with or like led me onto it with a Vitamix, and he was like, this thing's the fucking, and those things are rugged as hell.
Oh, yeah.
Like last through nuclear winter, but it's like $350, and I'm like, ugh. So Amazon, yeah, but I like the Ninja one that I got has, you know, the like single serve smoothie, like, and I know the one that works at the gym or that the gym works really well, but that thing will fucking annihilate anything frozen in like 3 seconds. So I've been on the smoothie train hard recently. Breakfast and potential dessert. Over the weekend, I had one entire container over the course of a day, one container of Greek yogurt, like vanilla, no sugar, like stevia.
Yeah, your snack chat sucks. I ate some vanilla yogurt. I'll see you guys next week.
Yogurt, and ate the entire thing over the course of 3 smoothies in one day because I was excited to use my blender.
Oh man.
Well, it's lactose free. It's like the I don't know what it is. Shabani. I don't know. It's good, but yeah, I've been.
Did you know that shit's big in the like bodybuilding community?
I mean, it makes sense.
They do the
super
fat-free,
high protein.
they do
it's
fat-free
no fat,
yogurt.
There's no sugar, like no added sugar.
People put the like flavoring packets and shit in it, so it tastes like they're eating. I honestly, I don't even know what it tastes like. They're eating pudding.
I was about to say I just bought some frozen bananas so that I can do chocolate proper banana and some peanut butter. Just fuck up a chocolate peanut butter smoothie. But yeah, that's my snack chat.
Yeah.
The Ninja blend, that thing's fire.
Ninja, hit us up. You know what I'm saying?
Make some
a Ninja sponsorship.
Start making recipes.
I'm still waiting for that Mission tortillas. Caroline and I believe, spend, I don't know, each like 10 grand a year on Mission gluten-free tortillas. Mission if you're listening.
Those things are good. What's yours? What'd you post last night? This is in the future now, but the other night, what, short rib, braised short ribs. Oh yeah.
And I had a couple of extra leftovers, so I turned them into pizza last night because I had a dough in the fridge. So
You turned the short rib into a pizza?
Whoa. What kind of cheese you go with?
So I
Sauce?
exclusively use full fat, low moisture mozzarella.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to find the full fat.
Yeah, you can get
The fucking part skim stuff, and it's like it like blows away in the wind. It turns into dust and trash.
stores around here have the Galbani, which is like the red.
Yeah. Yep.
I didn't do anything different with the rest of the pizza. Like I still went cheese, my regular tomatoes, a shitload of garlic.
Yep.
But then I just also put mashed potatoes and braised short ribs.
Sauce? Is it or white pizza?
So the sauce that I just had leftover sauce, but it's just crushed tomatoes, like I hand crushed tomatoes, put a little bit of basil, a little bit of salt. So they're basically just seasoned tomatoes instead of sauce.
I got no complaints. There's tomato sauce in my coffee right now. I don't fuck around. It's everywhere. Fuck. I put it on. Oh yeah, at least.
Won't eat an unpureed vegetable, but will fuck up tomato sauce.
I eat a lot of
salsa.
pureed vegetables. They're delicious. I just don't like the way they feel in my mouth.
God damn it.
Everything's fine. All right. That's a perfect segue. Mindset. I'm working on my food mindset, guys. Don't worry.
Sounds like you're dialed right now.
I'm fucking dialed.
A little bit confused. You're a little bit confused about the difference between breakfast sandwich and cheeseburger. But
I'm telling you guys, the next time you make a breakfast sandwich, do it exactly the same, but do like a small, thin smash burger patty and add it. Like not like just like quarter pound, like
also,
not big.
You're gonna need a hamburger bun for your breakfast sandwich.
No, use whatever you would normally use. I just don't have anything else.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So would you do a gluten-free bagel with that?
Oh fuck.
Like
yeah.
a gluten-free
It's so
everything
good.
bagel on that?
Yeah.
I mean, I would imagine that would be pretty good.
I've come full circle on the. I didn't like breakfast sausage as a kid. Snack chat lives. I didn't like it as a kid. I think it was like a lot of it was how much sugar they put in that shit. Like I'm not really a sweet kind of person with stuff like that. So I'm like, McGriddle, leave me alone.
Yeah.
Now a breakfast sandwich and then a side of pancakes sounds amazing. But I don't like mixing that shit.
Sandwich in syrup. Fuck.
But I started going with the sausage on the breakfast sandwich as an adult, and it's a bit of a game changer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do like mixing that up because you just get usually way more meat.
So one of the best things that you can do is get a real dirty, like 85-15, make a smash burger patty and slide that baby in. Everything else, keep it the same. Try it out, guys. Tell me if you just had a burger or you just had an amazing breakfast
All right,
sandwich.
I'll make a smash burger with an egg. You got it.
Don't you fucking say
I'll
it.
make a breakfast
Don't you say it.
cheeseburger.
All right.
I can't imagine what would happen to my kitchen at 8 a.m. if I was making smash burger. It's just like, why is the fire alarm going off?
Especially with like an 85-15 or an 80-20.
Yeah.
I actually think it was 80-20.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got
You're
grease.
swimming in it. You can't wear a shirt while you're
Grease
cooking
just
them.
floats
Ruins
around
your
my
shirt.
apartment, just lands on my pillow. I'm just
I love
rolling around in grease on
That's
my
beautiful.
eyelids every morning. It's like, oh yeah.
All right. So step one.
Conjunctive. Nah, yeah, that's just
Step
just the
one to your
85-15.
off-season mindset to make it all the way from off-season one through the open is cheeseburgers.
It's smash burgers
it's-
for breakfast.
It's smash burgers for breakfast. All right. So today's topic is, it's not new. We've talked about it in a bunch of different contexts. Conti. And it's this idea of we have a really long time horizon in front of us. And at first, that's very exciting. Potentially, we just came out of the open. We just came out of quarterfinals. And it's like, I have so much time to work on the things that I need to. And hopefully you've jumped into, the Hatchet program and you're working on those things. But for some people, honestly, for just about everybody, for most athletes, there's these periods of time, that can show up in, who knows, July, September, November, December, where you really just fall into what feels like the monotony of it all. And like, can I really work on this? Can I stay consistent? And I think it's important to sort of identify why certain things like that can happen and what you can do about it. Because we really are asking you at misfitathletics.com to like put your head down and work for 10, 11 months in a row without really any big breaks. So if that's the case, what are the keys to actually being consistent?
I think part of it is at this time of year in particular, it's taking advantage of kind of a less is more sort of mindset. I think it can be really easy for athletes to pick out a handful of things that they were either deficient in, that were exposed during quarterfinals or the open, and just kind of feel either the overwhelming sense of like, I have a lot of things that I want to work on, and therefore I'm going to try to do everything at once, or I'm going to get right after it, without kind of having that slightly longer term mindset as far as like, hey, I need to be able to do this for the next 10 months or so, not just the next month and a half where motivation is super high. And then on the flip side, there's athletes who basically will either through bad experience in the open, bad experience in quarterfinals, whatever it is, kind of maybe not take the necessary time. I think we're probably past quarterfinals enough that hopefully athletes have done enough self-reflection, but there's also the element of like, do I want to do this again next year? Do I want what are realistic goals? It's like maybe you didn't find yourself where you thought you were going to be on the leaderboard, and you're like, is it worth another year of beating myself into the ground? It's like, well, I'm just going to do, we always joke about it. I'm going to be a weightlifter for the next 3 months. I'm going to do marathon training, or I'm just going to take class, whatever it is. I think it's the first step is kind of, once we've stepped away from quarterfinals far enough that your season is like behind you in such a way that you can reflect in a non kind of in a more objective way and try to pick out like, well, did I really have a bad experience, or was it just this one thing that I didn't do super well at that I can actually work on over the next 10 months? Or do I have a list of like 5 to 10 things that I need to work on? But either way, I think it starts with that like reflection of what things went well, and I think that what went well is really important too. It's way easier to identify the things that went poorly, and especially this year's open, just at our affiliate in particular, we had a lot of athletes who were like unpleasantly surprised at the I would say the change in difficulty. Kind of there's a pretty big swing from last year's Open to this year's Open as far as what athletes were expected to be able to do. And instead of recognizing that, athletes will put it on themselves to say like, wow, I didn't even improve this year in the Open. And it's like, yes, I want you to compare yourself year to year, but we also have to take into account what the tests were. And I've said that. I said it on one of our last podcasts. I think this was the most well-rounded and probably one of the more challenging Opens in the past 5 years, probably. So kind of putting all that into context before you start making decisions in one direction or the other, as far as like, okay, I'm going to do double sessions every day for the next year versus I'm a weightlifter for the next 3 months and I hate CrossFit.
Yeah, we had one athlete comes to mind. He wanted to go to semifinals, and what he did in terms of the gap of where he was when he showed up at the gym last year.
Yep.
And how much of that journey he took in a single year to get closer to it was, to us, like, okay, you're on the right track. You're doing exactly what you need to do. You know, you're moving better. You're not shying away from going hard in workouts. But it was, you know, essentially looking at the wrong target and not realizing like how far he had come. And from a coaching perspective, confidence is proof. Like, we work all year to get better at certain things. And as a coach, you have to call out that proof constantly. It's like, I'm not confident in this. And it's like, well, you should be. Look, it's here, here, and here. You already did it. You've already done that. And then you can go in and do that. And, you know, the athlete does have to buy into these things, but so many people look at this stuff and don't realize, you know, they look at it and they don't realize that the targets that they've set out, maybe it's, you know, something that's a year away or 2 years away. Like, that's like the end all be all. And they don't realize how far they've come. Yeah. And we see this at every single level. We see this all the way up to athletes who do well at the CrossFit Games. They just get into these lulls and get into that, you know, the sort of the dark side of the off season mindset. And they're like, I'm not good. I saw this person's post. I can't do X, Y, and Z. Yeah. And then we go back to the proof, and we either show it or we just create it.
Yeah. The one I had a conversation with a different athlete about her progress from last year to this year. And it was a little bit more, because I had been working with her for most of the year. It was a little bit more, I had a lot more information, a more objective approach. And I took a picture somewhere, but like, you know, back squat increased 30 pounds, jerk increased 20 pounds, clean and jerk increased 25 pounds, like these pretty substantial improvements. Yeah. And probably the biggest frustration was that in some of the open workouts, it was like, I got capped. I couldn't finish 20 strict handstand push-ups. And it was like, that might be true this year, but last year that 16 was probably like 2 or 3. Yeah. Last year at quarterfinals, that 185 clean and jerk was like, we're going to do this workout 3 or 4 times to see if we can get the timing right of when everything just kind of clicks and you get like one good attempt at it. And instead it was like, oh, turns out that you did 8 or 10 or however many she successfully completed, with including a couple of failed reps just due to small inefficiencies. And it was like, here are the numbers, here are the objective numbers. Let's compare this from last year to this year. Oh, by the way, you made a 57% improvement in, you know, your overall placement. Your average finish last year was somewhere in like 2,500th place versus this year where it was 1,500th place. And those big numbers can sometimes seem like daunting, and then or seem like, it's like, man, that's still 1,500th place, but it's like, yeah, but like, that's a massive improvement. That's why I do kind of like, I did like here's the percent change from last year, where it's like, you improved this much. Like, here's an objective, like this isn't me bullshitting you. This isn't you bullshitting you. I'm not trying to make you feel better. Yeah. This is what you did. And just because the tests were different, there's always going to be, there's never going to be an easy way to objectively measure progress when the tests are consistently different every year. It's just like that's a variable that we can't account for really well.
Yeah.
Short of, having the occasional retests, but like there are a lot of important metrics that we can pay attention to. And if you're a coach, like coaching athletes, especially if you have any athletes who fall into this trap, which is pretty much everybody who legitimately wants to compete at a high level, you have to be able to pull out like, hey, I know you didn't feel like you did great here, but let's compare that to where you were at, not necessarily where you hypothetically think you should have landed, because you don't know where the fuck you think you should have landed. Like you have somewhere you wanted to land, and you have some sort of known point based on where you landed last year, but like other athletes have a say, the programming has a say. Like there are a lot of variables outside of your control. So trying to pick out the things that you can identify as progress points or points to improve on, that's where you have to live.
The strength journey is a unique one as well. Anytime I take on a remote athlete that like, they're like, we gotta address this. In my mind, I won't always say this out loud, but in my mind, it's a 2-year process at a minimum, because yes, I can make you significantly stronger in a year if you listen, pay attention, don't add volume in places that you don't need.
Then you got to learn how to use it.
But then, you got to learn how to use it, but you don't really get to use it in those moments in the way that you do that following year. Yep. Being a strong CrossFitter coming back around to that second year and what you can do to execute on that is pretty powerful. But there are changes that need to be made in terms of like, you need to know what your new paces are on certain things, new sets in certain places. You'll surprise yourself in a lot of ways, and athletes get really bogged down in the mindset of like, I know I've said it a lot recently, but this hurts, so I must be going hard enough. And it's like, you don't even know. Now that you can go do 15 front squats in a row at 275, you're going to find out what hurts here once you, sort of get over that mountain.
That was part of the conversation as well. It was like, okay, you've spent the last effectively 12 months, again, the same athlete. You spent the last 12 months like working your ass off with developing like strict pulling and pushing strength, like just like raw strength period, along with the Olympic lifts. Your engine has gotten better. You've open the door to a wider range of intensities, because you can now do gymnastics movements at higher capacities, so you can go harder. Workouts that previously were I need to strategize around this movement are now workouts that are, for time or for max reps, whatever it is, because you can do the movements. It's important to take those things like, post quarterfinals, yes, you should be kind of resting, recovering, taking that mental break. But once we get back into training, like those things are now the standard for you. Like the minimums from last year have been raised to the point where it's not like you peaked yourself and now you've fallen back off to where you were last year. It's like, sure, you were theoretically the fittest you were going to be that weekend of quarterfinals. And, for athletes who hit that magical 1 rep max in a lift or something like that, we're not necessarily using that as like percentages for the future, but instead we're saying like, this is possible, and we need to make sure that the minimums, like you said, the pacing on machines, the set, like kind of the smallest set of a gymnastics movement that you're going to do, what weights are or are not intimidating to you in a Metcon, those need to be updated to a point where it's like, okay, I'm now working with this new set of parameters and this new fitness level that I need to take the next year to adapt to, and hopefully continue to push that, to the right.
Yeah. It's all well and good from the purple chairs, right? Like we get to sit here and tell people it takes 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years to get to this point. But we need to address how that's possible. And a quote that I heard recently that I actually used this weekend, and I essentially gave a lecture this weekend on lifestyle stuff, but it's the same exact conversation of like, let's spread out this time horizon and then look at it for what it is and get away from the 30 days of this and the whatever of this. It's the same sort of mindset that gets us trapped within exercising. And the quote is, be consistent before you're heroic. And my nerd brain goes to, that's actually a math equation. We have our examples of who is heroic in our community, and how did they do it? And how do they do it? How do they present as a hero? They're the most ridiculously disciplined, consistent people on earth. They just keep showing up. They just keep showing up. Like, if there is a secret, that is the secret. So, like, not only do you need to be consistent before you need to attempt to be heroic or act heroic, if you have any aspirations of being over here in this place that you dream of, like, the only thing that you can do is be consistent. And we had a podcast that was essentially 2 podcasts ago about volume. And again, this thing of the time horizon, if we zoom all the way out and stop looking at these single days or these single phases or weeks or months, we can start to ask, what is realistic for me to put like all of my effort into this? What sort of volume is realistic for 9 to 10 months? And if we think about it that way, and we think about over the course of 9 to 10 months, lift every single day, like, I'm not going to do the math right now, but it's a lot of lifts, right?
Yeah.
A conditioning piece where I go hard every single day is a lot. Skill sessions where I actually like dial back and walk before I can run, like every single day. So if we start there for a general competitor and we're lifting, doing conditioning, doing skill, and we spread it all the way out, maybe that's the only thing, maybe inside the gym, that's the only thing that you need to tweak. It's like, I don't need to do 5 pieces this phase and get burnt out and do 2 the next one, and then 4 a day, and then 3 a day, and then 2 a day, and be all over the place. What if I committed to 3 pieces a day, 2 pieces a day, and 5 days a week, every single week for the entire offseason?
Yep.
Sounds doable, can make massive changes. But when we drive ourselves into these places where we do too much, and our life outside of the gym is also driving us into the ground, that's when you end up in November, December, and you trick yourself into thinking, I hate this so much that I don't want to compete this year.
Yeah.
And then the open comes around and you do want to compete and you get back into it. And then you're like, fuck, I should have, basically gone back to that moment.
Right. I think if you there has to be an honest conversation with yourself as well about whether or not there's a big difference between saying I want to be let's say the goal is semifinals. I think saying to yourself, look at yourself in the mirror, say, I'm going to be a semifinals athlete. Okay, got it. Do a 360, look at yourself, say, I am willing to do the work that is necessary to be a semifinals athlete, and see if you believe yourself as much as you did the first time at the first statement that you made.
Yeah.
Because there's a massive difference, and you apply that to whatever level that you want. But it's like the question, it's rarely ever a question of whether or not you want the thing.
Yeah.
It's always a question of, are you willing to do the minutia that's required to get to that thing? And I think part of that, the consistency thing, there's just nothing that in the decade-ish that I've done CrossFit, and we've talked a little bit about this, the one thing that I probably have going for myself is the consistency.
Yeah.
It's like I'm doing something every day, and you could chalk that up to just being lucky enough to enjoy exercising, or feeling that I feel better when I exercise. I understand that's not the case for everybody, but that's part of my daily routine, is to get some sort of physical movement, whether that's CrossFit or something outside the gym. But there's really nothing that replaced consistency, and there's a reason that we see the same athletes at the top of every leaderboard who are the ones who've just been at it for so fucking long. And it's just those are the athletes who are no longer concerned about things like movements or time domains, or these very specific things that many of us get wrapped around in when we see an open announcement or a quarterfinals announcement. It's like, there's that movement that I've hated forever. It's like, the people who are the most consistent have enough training time behind themselves, and just enough, I guess, consistency, time in the gym, whatever you want to call it, to not be concerned about the minutia of those things that we often get wrapped around in. And if you're somebody who finds themselves concerned about those sorts of things, then yeah, I think it is looking at the okay, I have 10 months. I can either beat my head into the wall for the 2 months leading up to the Open or quarterfinals or whatever it is because I hate the rest of the time, or what's a more sustainable thing that I am willing to repeat every single day, that I can repeat every single day, that's also not going to detract from everything else that I have going on in my life. And unless you are a CrossFit Games level athlete, like you're all and even Games athletes, like everybody has other obligations. You've got a job, you've got whatever it is. You're not a professional athlete in the, in the objective terminology, but like there are ways that we can get around that by making sure that we have something that's sustainable over a long period of time, because there's nothing that replaces that consistency. There's just too much to do in the sport that to think that you can like get it all back in like 2 or 3 months, unless you're somebody who's been at it for a decade plus, who has that training time under their belt.
But even that athlete had to get to that point to then be the one who's trying to get it back every year.
Yeah.
So many of the people that struggle with this don't have that base.
Yeah.
Haven't built on those things.
That's where the consistency is. It's like you have that base gets built over years and years of consistency, not a season of consistency or a 3-month period of really good consistency followed by fuck all. But yeah, you got to kind of earning your volume on a micro and macro scale is a thing.
Yeah. I don't want to make this volume part 2, but I will for another few seconds here.
Do it.
Long pause for dramatic effect.
Long pause.
Yeah, the volume thing is just like at the highest levels, there are still those athletes who respond well to high volume, in medium volume, and low volume. And I don't think people really get that. Like there are athletes who you would assume, again, because of their heroic status, that they just eat up volume. And a lot of them don't respond well to super high volume. I've been through it with enough athletes where, a 22-year-old male and a 26-year-old male are very different animals. Mm-hmm. And they start to present like, oh, I get 2 weeks off. Whereas before it was like, I'm going to die if I take 30 seconds off. Yeah. And at the highest levels, there are athletes where if you give them volume that you honestly could even appropriately give a lower finishing semifinals athlete, it would be too much. So people get so obsessed with this mindset of like all of it, and especially during certain spurts of like all that I could put into this. And again, we talk about earn your volume, but if you zoom way out and count up how many opportunities you could get to work on your fitness and your strength and your skill with what the community would consider low volume for a competitor, it's still a ton of work if you like bring consistency to the equation.
Yeah, well, it's easy to go into the gym and train for 6 hours, do 6 training pieces over the course of half a day. It's less sexy and a lot less. Maybe it feels like you're doing less to do 3 training pieces a day, 2 days in a row. It's obviously a small example, but even in the case of the athlete who does respond better to high volume, that athlete has like. There's a certain point at which you can't say you are like, oh, I respond better to high volume versus low volume. Like unless you have the base level of consistency of literal years of just like day in and day out, 3 on, 1 off, 2 on, 1 off, or whatever your consistent schedule is, until you have enough time doing that. And I don't know what that number is as far as years, but it's definitely on the order of years. Between like on the low end 3 years of that sort of thing, and like probably closer to 5+, like unless you've put in that consistency of, not necessarily high volume training. Like I just consistently took affiliate class, or I did the competitor extra, or I did the 3 or 4 training pieces a day, the hatchet program for X amount of time, you don't actually know yourself well enough to say that you respond to high volume better versus low volume, high intensity.
Yeah.
And especially if you don't necessarily have all of the requisite skills and a certain base level of strength and capacity to perform it, to hammer the open workouts as prescribed, quarterfinals workouts, like unless you have all of those pieces put into place, like that's part of it as well. Part of the consistency is you've gotten to the point where there aren't really any movements that there are certainly some that you like more than others, but there's nothing that you can't do. The strength stuff is at a high enough level to compete at what we have learned to see as kind of the standard as far as what weights should be doable at the open and quarterfinal level. Until you have developed those things enough for them to not be all that big of a concern, there's still some consistency that you need to work on.
Yeah. I think part of it too is the semantics of how someone will essentially react to specific words. And it's something that I've been working on for a while and I've brought up on the podcast before, but when we get we're talking about things like mental toughness or willpower or motivation, those things need to be replaced with things like routine and consistency. And, the quote, discipline eats motivation for breakfast. Like, again, that even the word discipline, depending on how you grew up and how the word was used, can come off in the right way, but it has a meaning.
Yep.
Go to the dictionary and look up whatever the meaning is of discipline. And we can start to understand that, again, just this like idea of routine and consistency get us to a point where you feel motivated and you feel like you have willpower and you feel like you are tough. But just like with anything else, that is something that is earned and not just I am this.
Yeah. I think part of that too is definitely an internal shift about what's in vogue, what's cool, what's fashionable, the discipline thing. Like everybody and their mom now listens to David Goggins and wants to smash their head into the wall at 3 a.m. every morning. And it's like, okay, that might work for some people. I'd say he's in the extreme minority for him, as a specific example. I would way rather see an athlete who is like, yeah, I'm going to get my 8 hours of sleep. I'm going to come into the gym at the same time every day. I have this, and that to do. And I'm just going to do that every single day without the flat, like I'm not disciplined. It's just it's just what I do. It's whether it's reframing what, again, like you said, what the word discipline means or what consistency means to you. But it's like
routine sounds nicer, but what's
I don't give a fuck if you call it, the Black Flag Mondays. Like I'm going to come in every single day and do this. Yeah. Like this is just what I do. It's nothing special. It's not discipline. It's not consistency. This is what it is. That's what I do. This is how I get better.
Another coaching tactic, something that I think about a lot, is the idea of building bridges for athletes. So whether this scenario should exist or not, visualizing an athlete is standing over here, you want them to be standing over there. They see, cliffs into the abyss on both sides. I can't go over there. I can't go over there. Yeah. Everyone else is over there. The competitors are over there. How do I build a bridge for that athlete? How do I show them that you actually are over there in all these other ways? So if we have those tools and we've used them before, how do we do that? I think strength work or strength work adjacent type things are one of the easiest ways to build that bridge. If you come to me and you say, I suck at this movement or I'm new at it and I don't really know how to do it, like taking candy from a baby,
stand the hell by.
Like so easy with linear progression and consistency to get someone from point A to point B.
Yeah.
It's so easy.
Yeah.
And that could be, 6x10 walking lunges for a certain period of time. It could be misfit sets of strict handstand push-ups. Like I tried this thing more often and I got better at it, right? That translates to easily measurable things like skill work and then easy measurable things like bitch work, where the monitor's right in front of myself.
Yep.
And I know that from this point to this point, I do a test retest model, and I don't like bury myself in every single session along the way. I just find all these gears and I start to develop the musculature, and whatever energy systems are lacking, I come out the other side, I do better, right? Find where you have been able to be consistent and build bridges for yourself, and use that exact same structure when it comes to something else, when it comes to Metcons, or it comes to, you know, maybe even all the way to the point where you're zooming way back out and you're thinking about your training and being consistent as linear progression.
Yeah.
It's like, I think that from now until October that I can handle boom, boom, boom. And I'm going to do that 5 days a week, and I'm going to have the same schedule, and I'm going to get it done. And then I'm going to reassess there and be like, could I add a second Metcon once a week? Like, could I bump this up to a point where I can actually do that? And if we take that, you know, what I am calling the meathead mentality, like if we take that like linear progression and just show up and do what's written on the paper, and then do a little better, and then do a little better, and then do a little better. Like if we can start to apply that to a bunch of different things, that's when you can realize I do already know how to do this. I have the tools to do it. I just get insecure about, look at all those people over there. How did they get over there? I can't do that.
Yeah, well, I think it can be, especially when you start to think about, like when you're thinking about individual movements, for example, or individual deficiencies. It's like, I have a list of 5 things. It's like, okay, well, let's break this down. When do you, then this is what I do. I think it's probably similar to what you do, is like, okay, if we're going to start, I have 40 weeks to do that. And that means I'm trying to get from here. Here's my start point. Here's where I'd love to end. How do I logically get from point A to point B? And then it's like, well, if I'm planning to end here, what needs to happen immediately before that? So if my goal is to get 10 muscle ups in a row, well, I need to get 9 muscle ups in a row at some point before that, right? So for the first 4 weeks, I'm doing sets of 3. And then the next 4 weeks, one of those sets of 3 turns into a set of 4, and the other handful of sets are still sets of 3. And then next week, it's 2 sets of 4 and 3 sets of 3. And then it's 4 sets of 4 and 2 sets of 3. And we just add very, like the linear progression thing is so easy to break down, like literally, like I'm going to add 1 rep per week. I'm doing this for myself personally right now as a muscle up capacity EMOM that I'm doing. And I started with something I knew that I could do. I know I can do 3 muscle ups every minute for at least 15, maybe for a much longer period. But my goal is like, okay, I'm going to get to a point where I can do 5 or 6 muscle ups every minute for 15 minutes and like really increase my muscle up capacity. And it starts with, okay, I did every minute 3 muscle ups for 15 minutes. The next week, the first minute is 4 muscle ups. The rest of the 14 minutes are still 3 muscle ups. And I can do that for all of a sudden 30 or 40 weeks later. At some point, I'll probably add more than 1 rep to the set. But 30 or 40 weeks later, all of a sudden that same pattern is, as long as that I was consistent, all of a sudden that pattern is, okay, first minute is 6 muscle ups, then I've got 5s the rest of the way, sort of thing. And it's like, we can apply that sort of mentality, that linear progression, to just about everything. How quickly we climb depends on where you start and where you can reasonably finish. But as far as putting that plan together, that's not rocket surgery, you know, like people. And
if you follow Misfit Athletics, it's already in your program.
You already do it. Yes. Exactly. And it's more about identifying, like, as a, let's say, non-remote athlete, where as a remote athlete, we might just kind of do that for you. Like, it's just recognizing the progressions. It's hearing the podcast, hearing that, okay, 6x10 walking lunge, read the note that says this is week 1 of 18. Don't go too heavy or you'll die, sort of thing. And it's like, okay, well, I can do this for a really long time. We build that consistency, and you also gain a ton of capacity by doing that as well. It's not as much like, just because I could do 5 pounds heavier on these walking lunges doesn't necessarily mean I'm setting myself up for success 8 weeks down the road by jumping the gun now.
Yeah. Well, that's another like side tangent asterisk. Like, I'm so confident with these progressions that I'll typically double them in length and have the first half just be, I'm going to get you enough capacity in this so that when we start blasting it, you don't die.
You don't hurt yourself.
Exactly. Like this, the first, let's say it's 2 9-week phases. The first 9 weeks, I'm going to have you do it a bunch, but in like really small chunks.
Yep.
Just so that when we actually start, it doesn't take away. That's essentially where the idea of if one piece of your program's ruining the rest of it, then it's not, appropriate.
Yep.
That's where that idea comes from. So a lot of times it's like, it's actually going to be pretty easy to fix this, but it's going to dominate their nervous system and sort of take over.
Yeah.
And they're not going to be able to then go, do the actual sport. So let's spend 9 weeks of doing boring sets.
Well, especially with like CrossFit, you have to have that awareness, right? Because like you said, so somebody comes to you and is like, I'm not strong enough. I need to get stronger in the back squat. Just like, lick my chops, rub the hands together.
Any more
like,
brain busters?
I can get you. I can. This program will take me 18 seconds to write, and you'll be stronger than you've ever been in 1 month. But is it at the expense of other things that we're not willing to lose? And more often than not, the answer is like no. Like we're not going to do that. So that's where we come in, and we're just like, what is the kind of maximum effective dose of this thing that we can still move the needle in such a way that we can be moving the needle for the next 8, 10, 12, 60 or 16 weeks, whatever it is, without detracting from the rest of the things that I need you to be good at as a competitive CrossFitter, because there are too many things to lose capacity in something in order to gain capacity in something else, unless you're a freak in something and super deficient in another, where we're willing to say like, hey, we can sacrifice a little bit of your aerobic conditioning in order to get you much, much stronger, because the scales will tip favorably in your direction if we do that. But more often than not, it's making sure that, like you said, you're balancing it to the point where, yeah, I'm going to get you strong, but I'm like, this can't be the full dominating thing that crushes your nervous system and training day, whatever it is.
It's definitely not a surprise to you two. Won't be a surprise to many. I'm much more passionate about this sport than I am about business.
What? Come on.
So when I read about business, I'm like, my mind is like, how do I use this as a coach? How do I use this as a coach?
Yeah.
And a rabbit hole that I've been down recently, and you guys can tell me how my massaging and nudging it over into the coaching arena is developing. But the idea of finite versus infinite games and how people get these things confused. So we have, CrossFit in terms of you've got your Metcon next door. We know the rules. We know the players. There is an intended outcome. That's a finite game. It's intentionally meant to end, and you're done with it. You go do it, good to go. The infinite games are the ones that don't have these clearly defined players and rules, and the entire purpose of it is to keep it going, to keep it rolling. It is it just keeps going. And in business, the idea is people get wrapped up in these short-term bursts in games of like, it's this thing and then it's this thing, and they want to know, is there an end in sight? Like, am I going to get to stop this at any point? Yeah. And if the intention is to essentially stay in business and keep going, then you can't think about it from that perspective. And I think so many people think about diet and fitness and well-being in that finite sense. Yeah. And it's like, if that's finite, then at the end of this, do you die? Like, what's when does it end? Exactly. Dead. And the other side, of course it is finite in a sense, but infinite because you're not going to know once the game is.
I think a lot of people adopt that, and I'm guilty of that as well. I like to know, like, I like to have my schedule. I like to know. I don't necessarily like surprises. What? Yeah. Well, I don't surprise
I prefer to have as much control as I reasonably can over things that are headed my way. I dislike things that catch me off guard and surprised. And I think I don't think I'm alone in that, whether to varying degrees for everybody else, but the finite thing makes it seem like I am striving for something, and once I get it, it's done.
Yeah.
And there's a comfort level with that. It's like it's an AMRAP versus rounds for time. It's like the AMRAP, that clock's gonna save me. Rounds for time, like you decide when this ends, sort of deal. And there's more comfort sometimes in knowing that regardless of what happens, the clock will save you, so to speak, versus having that mindset of like, well, like this is, I can't necessarily see over the horizon. I just know that I need to kind of keep going in that direction and having a little bit of faith that whatever's on the end of that is either what I want, or somewhere along the way it's going to lead. I'm like, this path that I'm taking is going to either open a new opportunity for me that I would not have otherwise seen, and maybe it's in a completely different direction than you originally thought, or hopefully more likely just being able to, again, kind of look back down the mountain, look back on the path that you've taken and see the progress that you've made and say like, wow, I can use that as momentum to keep trending in the right direction or adjust course if needed.
Yeah, I think, not to go too far off to the side here, but I think the like increase in people having anxiety and the culture that we have, at least here in America, is like, once I have this house, then everything's going to be X, Y, and Z. Once I finally make it to vacation, like I'm going to be good to go. And we put all of these things here. And what that does is it keeps us out of what we're actually doing and puts us out into the future in a place where there are all these unknowns and we're not really sure. We're always just stuck in like what is going to happen, not what's literally happening right now. Like the only thing that can matter is what's currently happening. It's the only thing that you have some sort of control over. And
you have no way of predicting what's going to happen in the future.
No.
Like you have like literally what
you could if you paid attention to what's going on now and did something about it.
Sure, exactly. Yeah. Without doing that, you have no idea where you're going to find yourself. And that's, I think that happens to a lot of people. It's like you're too busy not paying attention to what's happened now to realize that like you've veered off course for so long that you're not even in the same zip code that you started in. And now you need to make an even bigger adjustment because you were almost too focused on, you took the macro view, but you didn't zoom back into like what you can do right now in order to pursue that larger goal.
I personally find a lot of freedom in the idea that we're going to just keep doing this thing because I think there's something to where you can kind of relax and settle into what it is that you do. And I hate to break it to anybody who hasn't figured this out yet, but you're not doing this for the reasons that we put out there in February and March and however long you make it into the season. Those single moments in time are not worth enough in actuality to keep you running all year round, year after year after year.
Right.
And that's why we have to talk about what we're talking about right now. We decide that there is an ending. We decide that once I get here, I'll be good and I'll be satisfied. And if that's my goal, then I arrive there and year after year, I'm disappointed no matter what. Like no matter what, I could do really well. I could do really poorly. I could do, somewhere in between, but this was supposed to be it. It was supposed to be over. If that's the case, why are you disappointed no matter what? You're going to keep going.
Yeah.
Like the people listening to this podcast, not only do you like CrossFit, you like the sport of CrossFit, you like the sport of CrossFit enough to follow a specialty program, and you like it enough to do all of that and listen to us ramble about it, right? You love this thing. Stop putting those labels of I'm going to be done once the open happens or quarterfinals or semifinals of the games, and realize this is something that you like and something that you want to do, and like let your shoulders drop a little bit and be like, oh, okay, I'm just going to show up tomorrow and work hard and do something that's appropriate and add to it the next day.
I don't think there are too many athletes at too many levels who don't experience that end of season kind of drop off. What's it called? Like post competition depression, whatever it is, kind of that regardless of what level you're at, like you're saying, it's the idea that, okay, I finally did my Super Bowl. It was quarterfinals, and in your head, it was like this big thing, and it turns out like, things went poorly in that workout. I wish I did something better in that one. And it's like we're way more attuned to those negative things, and it just makes it more apparent that once, quote, you're done, it's like, I don't feel like I did anything, or I don't feel like I'm done. It's like, that's because you're not.
Right.
And like, if the sport is as good as we think it like has the potential to be, that point won't ever happen, because the level of athlete is going to continue to just like, it's just going to continue to go up. And I don't think there's an athlete at any level, like literally any level, from first place at the CrossFit Games down to 12,000th place in the Open, who doesn't at the end of the year have at least a handful of things that they're like, well, this could have gone better. My life, my life in the last day of the CrossFit Games would have been a hell of a lot easier if I had just been better at this in event 3 or whatever it is. There's so much self-reflection, and again, most of the time it's like things that you could do better to work on, that like you can't have the mindset of it's done. Like, it's done, I'm starting over, or it's done, like I need to reset myself and then I'm going to start again. It's like you can have the ebbs and I would expect anybody to have the ebbs and flows of being super excited to be competing and just be like, I hate this, I don't want to, or that's probably a little bit extreme, but it's like, this is really demanding, I'm questioning my decisions. Like, all of those things are normal. What we don't want is to get into a place where it's like you said, I get to the end of whatever it is you've deemed the end, quote unquote, and said like, well, what do I do now? It's like, what do you mean, what do you do now? You just keep doing what you have been doing. You just have a whole bunch of new information to redirect your path if you found that you started to steer off course.
Yeah, we get so many of these athletes nowadays who like need to create that defined end, and they retire, and then it's like, you're clean and jerking a lot more than you used to. What's happening here? It's the off season and you're fitter. Like what's going on? The thing that came into my mind when you were talking about that post competition dump is this idea of the adrenaline. And I talk to athletes a lot about how to use adrenaline. And the first step in that is the Metcon reset. So it's like, okay, I know that you cannot simulate competition speed at the beginning of a peaking phase, 1, because you're not ready, and 2, because the lights aren't on, the fans aren't there, the stakes aren't high, whatever you want to call it. So we're going to put 30 seconds of rest here and a minute of rest here. But I want you to spread out the intensity over the course of the entire thing. Mm-hmm. If you're doing a Metcon reset and you go, oh, sick, I got rest coming up here in 30 seconds. And you just, pedal to the metal. That's not what that is. That's an interval. Yeah. Those are 2 completely different things. And then it's like, okay, did you go a little bit harder that whole time? Now that's what a competition is. You get a bump. You get 10% up, 15% up, 20% up. It depends on what kind of athlete you are, what kind of energy systems you favor, but we need to spread that out. Yep. And this idea of how much motivation that we sort of bank and create within ourselves. Do I want an athlete to dump all of that into the month of May? Probably not, right? So we're zooming out once again and realizing that I need to like have an adrenaline drip, basically. I need to have it come out slowly over the course of the year, because a lot of the things that we talk about, the listeners are good at. They have the consistency and the discipline and the routine, but again, they build up all of this like motivation within themselves. They sort of earn it. And then just because they're pissed off about what just happened, just go as hard as they possibly can in May and June, and don't, again, spread that out over the course of the year. And surprise, surprise, you just need to be consistent again. Yeah. And then you build more of that, and you want to come back for more.
One of the conversations I had with the same athlete that we were talking about earlier in the podcast was athlete had one goal in mind of just being the fittest at the gym, and somewhere along the lines that turned from fittest athlete in the gym to like why not semifinals? And then it was, I want to go to semifinals. And it was like, finished the weekend again, terrific, massive improvement from last year, but in the, I want to say like 500th place-ish. And I wasn't totally sure. I was like, it's always difficult to make predictions as to where an athlete might fall, especially if they're not like true. It's easier to identify an athlete who's just like, that person's a semifinal athlete or in the hunt, versus like, this athlete is not a semifinals athlete, but I'm not totally sure how far out they might be. But it was like, again, the part of the conversation was like, I'm not going to compete. I don't think I'm going to compete next year. And this was on probably Sunday after like last workout had been submitted, like quarterfinal Sunday, like up submission window, close to closing, whatever it is. They're, kind of the immediate reflection of the weekend, and the immediate thought was like, I don't think I'm going to compete again next year. I don't think I'm going to do what I did last year again this year, which was I'm going to put a little bit additional work. I'm going to do some extra math sessions. I've got some additional training pieces that I'm doing over the course of the week. And it was like, part of that conversation was like, you never have that conversation with yourself so close to that competition. Like, hey, you need to take time to like take a week to reflect, take another week to just dick around with fitness, maybe not work out at all, get back to enjoying fitness, like enjoying doing the things that you did that made you enjoy this to begin with before you started competing. Take class with your friends. Don't pay attention to your rounds and reps. Don't pay attention to how long the workout takes you. Put a smiley face up on the board. Don't give a shit about what your lifting numbers look like for a certain period of time. And then you can have that self-reflection. But it's like 8 minutes after the submission window ends, I'm not competing anymore. It's like, don't do that to yourself. Don't say that. Don't worry. Don't think about that. You're way too close to the fire to make any sort of rational decision about that. Instead, it's like, let's wind down a little bit. Let's do some honest self-reflection. Let's see, like, you don't even know what your goal was before we started. It was just to do better, that you had a rough goal of being the fittest person in the gym. You achieve that through quarterfinals in the open, but like then to go to say to yourself that you adjusted your expectation to be something that wasn't necessarily realistic, and the consequences or the result is that I'm not going to compete next year, or I'm not going to give it the same effort and dedication that I did last year for this year. It's like you're missing the forest for the trees here.
There's a super famous actor who said that when he gets offered a role and he likes the script, he takes 2 weeks to pretend he's accepted the role, and then he takes 2 weeks to pretend he's turned it down. And he ruminates on both. And, when you're sort of obsessing over something, it enters your dreams and it sort of dominates your conscious and subconscious mind. And then he gives his answer for that. And it's just, I think, bigger decision making, something like that deserves the same amount of attention that you gave to the thing in the first place.
For sure.
And you have to, everyone's got to go through it. You got to go through it yourself. You have to make a dumb decision like that. That's too hasty, a little bit too quick. But then the ultimate sin is not learning from that and not realizing, like, I am going to feel this way and that's fine. I'm going to whatever, but I'm not going to call my coach and say I quit 30 seconds after the workout ends, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was one other thing. What was my final thing? You got final thoughts?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Fuck. Ted, cut it out.
Yeah. So we can start it off with sort of recap mode, I think, a little bit.
Yeah.
The idea here is, what sort of planning and routine and discipline can we create now that takes us from what our point A to point B is? And if you're at misfitathletics.com, that's Hatchet Offseason 1 through open/quarterfinals prep. We're starting now. We're going all the way into February, and we have to figure out, again, that full zoom out all the way back We're looking at the entire thing based on previous years, based on knowing yourself as an athlete and those ebbs and flows. What can my schedule look like? You can reevaluate it in 3 months, in 6 months, in 9 months, whatever. But what am I committing to now as my minimum that I'm going to show up and execute on? And that's like one of those, like those contracts that's non-negotiable. You will not negotiate with yourself.
Yeah.
And like, I'll create those with an athlete and say, hey, I need to know that you told me you want to win the CrossFit Games. And when I start treating you that way in November and you don't like it, do you want me to back off? Like you can, we can have a fucking safe word. You can say that's enough of that. I don't like, maybe I'm not ready for this, or I think I'm going to get injured or whatever. But if we create that contract, coach and athlete, then I'm not fucking around. Even if I don't like it, even if it's uncomfortable for me to be like, why aren't you doing this? No shit, you're hurt. You're not warming up. You're not cooling down.
Yeah.
Like that's not enjoyable for the coach.
Yeah.
But again, if someone said, do what you got to do to turn me into that, it's like, okay, on an individual level, we set those concepts and those ideas and those minimums too. I am going to execute on this. And maybe, or just hopefully, or you can, again, reevaluate at some point. But like, what is that dose? Because I'm telling you right now, if you warm up and cool down and think about the way that you move and you go hard in pieces, you don't need as much as you think you do. We need to put more eggs into the basket of execution than we do of check. I did 16 things. No, you didn't. You did 0.
Yeah, I mean, you can, here, I'm going to do some quick, hopefully accurate math. Let's just assume for, again, ease of math, that we have 50 weeks until, just a little under a year, 50 weeks until the season starts, or till you have 50 weeks to prepare for whatever your Super Bowl is.
Yep.
If you do 3 training pieces a day for those 50 weeks, let's say, so that's 15 training pieces a week times 50 weeks. That's 750, right?
Yep.
Good so far. 750.
I did the math in an easier way, but we ended up at the same number.
750 training pieces.
Yeah.
Training, lifts, conditioning, bitch works, metcons, skill sessions, whatever it is. 750 of those that can move the needle for you over the course of the next.
We're not moving the needle on 750 sessions.
Jesus fuck. And let's say that is, again, it's like let's say it's 2 hours per, 3 hours per, you're looking at over 2,000 hours worth. All of a sudden you start to think about, now we're in the realm of like, well, what's mastery of something? It's like 10,000 hours. It's like, okay. So if I'm legitimately getting after it for over 2,000 hours per year, and I would say that's probably on the low end for the competitive CrossFitter, like how many years of consistency does that take to get to the point where we do know enough about ourselves that we can really make intelligent, informed decisions about our training? You've paid attention to every single one of those training pieces and those training hours that you've put in, and you have so much information as to how to move yourself forward. And by the way, you don't have to wait until, it's not like I have no information, 10,000 hours, now I have all the information. It's like every day that you train, you're gaining more knowledge about yourself. It's like, again, we're not thinking about how we can move the needle over 750 training pieces in a year, I don't know, there's a disconnect somewhere.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden you start to say, again, 50 weeks. Let's say I work on muscle ups twice a week for 50 weeks, like 100 muscle up sessions. You're going to tell me that we're not going to move the needle over 100 opportunities to improve our muscle ups? Like, get the fuck out of here.
Well, people think that adding 1 doesn't work, and it's like, you ain't doing 100.
I could have fucking told you that.
Yeah.
It's like, nice job on that lifting session. Like, did it work? No, it didn't work. Didn't do anything for you. Like, it just, it gave you that one step towards it doing something for you.
Yeah. Another thing that was supposed to be about business that's now about coaching. 10,000 hours is actually, with the athlete IQ mindset, should be 10,000 iterations. And there are people in our space who show up consistently, but they're not consistent in the effort put forth in the actual thing.
Yeah.
Like I know some people doing 4 or 5 pieces a day, and they do not miss sessions, and they don't get they're good, but they don't get anywhere near where they're supposed to be because everything is a checkbox. They have their 10,000 hours. We have to meathead mindset, like I'm going to get from point A to point B has to have iteration in it, right?
Yeah.
Like you're not going to do an EMOM of 3 muscle ups in perpetuity forever, right? Like I'm not going to keep that actually would help a lot, but maybe a bad example. But again, if you're trying to make it to somewhere else, you have to continue to iterate.
Yeah.
You have to continue to ask yourself the question of how did this go? Did it go well? Okay. Can I do a little bit better the next time it comes around? Is my time horizon to get better 1 week because it's 0.1 seconds, or is it a year because it's 10 seconds? Something like that.
Yeah.
So really just make sure that as we zoom out and we zoom in and we basically just keep going back and forth, like once we are back in the micro, once we are back in, today is the only thing that I need to focus on right now. It's like actually going in and executing on that thing.
Yeah. I mean, like you can, the intention thing to the 10,000 hours is that's really what it is, because a lot of you listening have probably, here's an example. You've probably driven a car for 10,000 hours. Why aren't you a NASCAR driver? It's like, I don't know, like why aren't you?
I am.
Why aren't, maybe you are. I mean, you don't know, but why you've driven, you've done this thing for a substantial period of time, probably every day for the last however long you've had since you've had your driver's license. Why aren't you a professional driver of some sort? It's like, well, because that's not what I've been focusing on. Like that's not how I've approached driving. I haven't done it with the intention of going faster, getting or having any sort of measurable metrics. This is just a thing that I do. And if that's the mindset, if it's I train and that's just the thing that I do without any sort of intention to it, then it's not the same kind of idea. Like there is a consistency to it.
Sure.
And that's terrific. There's nothing that you can't replace that. But if I'm just consistent and I don't pay attention to anything, well, we got to couple those things together.
Yeah. I think I'm going to end with just a little bit more of a nudge to think about the micro versus macro on a consistent basis, knowing that I just need to show up and execute today is what's going to really fuel what you're doing. And then you are going to run into those moments where this type of podcast is what you need to hear. And that's when you zoom out, zoom way out, like really look at it, really look at why you do what you do, what the point of it all is, realizing that if this is an infinite game and I'm having a bad day today, it won't matter if I miss a day, because I know that in the infinite game, missing one means I just jump back on. I have one day where I, can't necessarily bring it with that full intensity. And then there's probably a pretty good chance that something else is happening within your life. But micro, day to day, go in, execute. And when you have that mindset, pull back, like zoom way out and just look at all of it. Take it all in, be like, wow, I've made it this far. I haven't felt this bad up until this point. It's a pretty good chance that this is just a moment in time and that I can keep working.
We did it.
Did he just skip out on his final thoughts?
That was my final thought. The final thought was the NASCAR thing.
Oh, I like it. All right. You're not a fucking NASCAR driver.
You're not a goddamn
Hunter
NASCAR
Wood.
driver. Any of you.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of the Misfit Podcast, and thank you to our show sponsors, properfuel.co. Use the code word Misfit to save. Sharpentheaxeco.com. Use your favorite athlete code. Go in there. You save some money. They get some money for semifinals and the CrossFit Games journeys, which are very, very expensive. And last but not least, misfitathletics.com for your individual programming needs and teammisfit.com for your affiliate programming needs. We'll see you next week.